Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here today. Such esteemed colleagues to be talking about this conversation that we're having. I'm going to talk a little bit about the roadmap of what we've articulated internal to NGA as well as our expeditionary architecture. I'll let everybody just absorb the outline there. It wouldn't be an NGA brief without an outline. So we have big data management problems and big analytics problems, but we've got one big data problem, and that is assessing how we're going to have contextual meaning. It's one thing to have a lot of models that you can do MapReduce algorithms against, but if you have no way of understanding the context of the data, we're just shoveling data around. So our mission is to provide the context to raw data analytics, to not move the data around, and to create opportunities and accessibility, discoverability, and dissemination to these data attributes. Key to these are our objectives that we've identified that fundamentally we need to understand how the commercial and industry sectors have already done this, how we align ourselves to a GeoInt framework that's based upon platform APIs, understanding truly how we really distribute the data through a globally distributed namespace construct. We really need to establish an ultra-large scale system infrastructure for data-intensive computing. In other words, we're going to leave the data where it resides and create another paradigm shift towards remote exploitation. In order to do this, we need to understand that the cloud is not a one-dimensional set of lenses. It's a multi-sided platform that really requires the business side, the agile side, the mission side, the analytics side, the cloud side, the infrastructure side, the data dissemination. All of these sides are part of this view. It's not a single set of lenses. This data cube, if you will, allows us to harness the content so that our providers and our developers and more importantly, and most importantly, our mission analysts in the AOR are able to get to this data without having to look for it. So we've fundamentally transitioned some of our internal organizations to focus on some fundamental principles to enable this construct. First is our open IT environment, which is going to be fundamental to establishing a new set of frameworks. These new set of frameworks will be fundamentally based upon how we are going to harness the utility space of compute. There is no more requirement to system engineer the physical servers for today's technology. The next part is how we're going to harness an architecture to actually implement data content and not data repositories. The discoverability of content and accessibility of this content is a powerful mechanism that makes it transparent to where the data resides and enables the analytics that we have not thought about for today. It allows the analyst to understand how to ask the question without knowing where the data is to ask a prescribed question to it. So I mentioned the strategic initiatives. Those initiatives are there in order for us to meet our vision integration goals. The goals are to provide open content, increase partner responsiveness, and available all over the value of the data. In other words, we want to make it very transparent to our mission providers and our mission warfighters to use the data. They should not have to look inside of an external portal, which is a concatenated catalog of certain data types, and then when they want to find another data type, they have to look inside of another catalog. We do not want to continue that path. The applications and services will originate with NGA, but this universal NSG framework is really there to absorb how we partner with these organizations to make a collaborative framework. So it wouldn't be a cloud presentation without a great Architune. So this is our Architune that describes, and it also educates, has been an education process for the IC and DoD, that we're trying to articulate that the compute environment is no longer something you need to think about. We need to understand it's just utility space. So part of this utility space is to position ourselves so that we are really focusing on the logical abstraction of these environments. You've seen Amazon's briefings and how they've articulated that and made it very transparent. I won't go into the details, but the purpose of this slide is to show how our path is identifying how we harness this approach. And we've identified our ConOps, our framework going forward, that is going to be fundamentally managed by what we're calling a global resource manager. The global resource manager allows us to take all of the components and treat them as modular utility functions. It allows us to turn off or on physical and virtual components. It allows us to provide a mission warfighter the opportunity to create a palette of opportunity they never thought they could have before. This is a powerful, powerful tool to provide a mission analyst. Imagine you're sitting in an area where you have been told to bring in some data elements and you don't have the physical resources at your footprint. But if you could go to a location and harness a well-provisioned environment through the Global Resource Manager to allocate the crunching power to do that algorithm on demand, this is our concept. The challenge for us is that a lot of this may sound familiar, but the challenge for us, this is in places where there aren't a lot of comms. There aren't a lot of nice Starbucks cafes. It's in an environment where we have to drop things and we have to do things so that they are mission effective. So having a mission iterative business model that allows us to change our current mission planning model to harness the constructs of cloud from a provisioning perspective as well as a map-reduced Hadoop perspective from an HPC paradigm, we are focused holistically on providing this to the mission warfighter. So I mentioned the three strategic initiatives. With those strategic initiatives as the foundation layer, we now have an opportunity to actually begin an agile business cycle of how we deliver applications and how we socialize the exposure of this content for developers to actually contribute to code, to create data, create applications to this content. So our focus really is a unified data space, creation of a global data standards, and a defense in depth posture rather than a perimeter defense posture. Some of the things that I've heard are still talking about the old ways of putting a firewall in front of something. Well, we still have to do that, but we have to look well within the object space to understand how we create a defense in depth security posture for that. So implementing the cloud in these austere environments, we have to make sure that content data providers have accessibility to the SDK kits. We need to establish cloud anchor points, in other words, a common set of APIs and SDK kits for them to use. And it needs to be a self-assisted full service model. In other words, don't prescribe to the analysts or the mission warfighter or the other cloud providers what they should be using. Give them the opportunity to create some of their own. This allows for an integrated and exposed set of close resources as well as separate resources in different locations. I have to remind myself of the location where we're speaking today. So on the far right-hand side, typically, those of you may not be able to see it, we have satellites and sensors and ways of collecting data. A lot of those today have their own unique way of collecting, storing, and sometimes actually providing access to the data. What we're proposing and what we're trying to achieve is that following these cloud tenets, and from a provisioning perspective, from a data architecture landscape, we're going to make the sensors transparent to the users. So part of this new fundamental landscape is understanding the building blocks or the stacks, although these may look like cylinders. They're not meant to be cylinders. We truly believe that global namespace is something that needs to be explored far more than it is today. The construct of global namespace allows us to make the type of data or content very transparent to the user application or the machine-to-machine or cloud-to-cloud interoperability. Fundamental to that, we believe there's a horizon that we have yet to get to, which is a universal unique identifier. How we can harness a UUID to set the new layer of how we're going to have data content versus data types. I'll elaborate that on the next slides. Use of OSGI bundles. You heard previous speaker how they're doing some of their Java virtual machines. Same construct there, how that can be very loosely coupled in this fabric. Profile management. Profile management takes what you've seen with Amazon's way of managing the virtual machines, and this takes it to a level of orchestration and choreographing of not only VMs and APIs, but actually creating mission threads, mission scenarios, mission templates, opportunities for an analyst to create something of their own. The UUID is a construct that we are collaboratively working on amongst our agency partners here. Gus and I and other agencies are actively evaluating how we could harness this construct. There are some other descriptions of this that I won't go into in this forum. But fundamentally, if we treat all data as just data, we can stamp it, we can give it a pedigree, we can create entity resolution to it, we can actually create relationships, and more importantly, establish a global context to the data. Creating containers of context allows us to keep the data in heterogeneous environments, but allows us to correlate actual relationships we didn't think about before. So big data, social networking, mobile, cloud, these are all components that we're actively reviewing, aware of, and addressing, and as we go forward in our reference architecture and our cloud computing endeavors. So in summary, right now I would say that we are focused primarily on identifying the platform and the content strategy that I talked about, UUID, but we're also looking at the full circle here of how we're going to make it the user interface, information assurance, how we address concerns with the security posture of these environments, as well as ultimately meeting the objectives of our director, which is we really need to provide a on-demand, online environment for our users so that they don't have to look for data and they can focus more time, if not all the time, on analyzing the data. Yeah, that's my last slide.